So, yeah, something that my teacher uh, told us. So this last retreat, this metta retreat we did in October, something that I check every day now in this age of social media and rage bait and people at each other's throats. She said, check your mind for kindness every time before you speak, and you're going to save yourself a lot of trouble if you do that.
All right, John Meeker, thank you so much for being on the show. It is great to have you. You've got your cool YouTube channel there, Big Dharma, and it seems like it's like a spirituality minimalist, kind of YouTube channel. But maybe you can do a better job of kind of like letting our audience know a little bit more about who you are and what Big Dharma is all about.
Okay, yeah, sure. So, yeah, my name is John Meeker. I've been practicing meditation for 15 years now. Um, a few years ago, so like the definitive moment in my adult life was I became a caregiver at 27 when my mom had a stroke and she became disabled and totally dependent on us. And then what she was living with her husband. He was becoming abusive, so it wasn't safe for her. So I took over, and I was still getting my engineering degree at the time. So she moved in with me, and it became like a crisis immediately. Um, Luckily, by that time, I had been practicing meditation for a few years, so I had a little bit of a base to work off of. But then I ratcheted up my practice, so I was meditating an hour a day, and then over time, it was like 2 or 3 hours a day, and then over time, my sisters like moved out, started their own families. We became sufficient to the point where I could move out, and it was like, what am I going to do next? Like, what's my next move, kind of thing. But before that, a few years ago, I had gone on a retreat. I'd never been on a retreat before, and I it was just a mind shattering experience. To where it was like, oh my God, like this stuff that I thought was could be real is all real. And I started my YouTube channel back then as if you go all the way to way back of my videos, like 2 or 3 years ago, it was like a caregiving slash mindfulness channel because I just wanted to be like, oh, this now that I have this tool, my tool belt, I want to share it with other people who might need that tool, meditation and mindfulness. And then I put some videos up. They did okay, but it wasn't like I didn't know how to make YouTube videos or anything like that. And then what happened later on is about a year ago, year and a half ago, um, like my sister and her husband have great jobs. I have a good job now. So it was like, okay, we can afford to move her into a facility now. So we did. And then I was like, what's my next step going to be after this? And I work as an engineer. I was working in Silicon Valley. I wasn't super stoked about going back. I may be going back now, but at the time I was like, okay, what am I going to do? So I bought this van. I'm inside a van right now. I bought this van and I was like, I'm going to document my travels, but then try to put everything through the lens of like a spiritual perspective, like how I'm practicing with this and how this reflects on different. So I practice Buddhism, so it's different Buddhist teachings. Um, and then as time went on, um, like work got kind of hard, and I was driving a lot, and I was like putting like 40 hours a week into these videos, and then also working. And I was like, okay, this is too much. Just something had to give, and I just started basically just talking about what I was interested in without any of the production value and the theatrics. And people really like those videos. So people, when I was like, okay, so now it's kind of like shifted towards like what of the most interesting spiritual topics to me, and then putting a short 2 or 3 minute short up around that with decent production value, and hoping that other people like them. And I've been getting a lot of people writing to me saying like, oh, your stuff is so great. Like, I like that you talk about meditation from like a grounded, rational, logical perspective, and not like, all these like crazy like astral projection and all this. Like, to me, like that stuff's cool. And like my teacher, if you told her like I astral project, she'd be like, did you learn anything from that? Like, like what? She wouldn't be impressed at all. She'd like dissuade you from doing that. And I try to bring that. So like the objective of my now of my channel is to, um we have this like loneliness epidemic, and like this age of isolation. And these are tools that I use that I make me happy and I think other people can use. And I try to maintain the credibility of keeping it grounded and keeping it logical and keeping it. So I try to like start everything from like a scientific perspective and then show how like these things, if you want to operate on that purely logical, empirical level, you can look at practice this way, and that's actually preferred. And so that's the way I practice, and that's the way I want to. I don't see a lot of resources out there, and that's what I want to try to provide.
Wow. Well, looking at your van, it looks pretty cool. But the first thing I wanted to ask you after about you said you were interested in the loneliness epidemic. Do you ever get
Mm-hmm.
lonely being in the van?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Sometimes, I mean, I'm a very independent person to begin with. But when you don't see another human for, I mean, I see other humans, but you don't have a social interaction for 2 weeks.
Whoa.
I don't care like how independent you are. It's gonna wear on you.
Yeah.
And that was like during that time when I was doing all that work, and I was just like, oh man, this is too much. I gotta find community, whether it's on the road or whether it's in person. So that's why I'm back in California, where I'm from. Starting to figure out like what's that going to look like moving forward. But yeah, definitely, there's lonely moments, but there's awesome moments too. You can't separate the two.
Uh,
Like I have some like mind blowing moments just of nature and you go 5 minutes off the freeway. I'm sure it's probably the same in Canada, and you're just like in this incredible place that I might have driven by 50, 60 times before, but never seen because I was just on my way to the next place. And, you know, and this thing, my bed's right here. So I have direct access to it. So it's a give and take. You have really intense sort of like introspection driven by loneliness and that side, but then that sort of blossoms into like mind blowing nature, independence, insights that you wouldn't have had otherwise. So it's a double edged sword.
yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking about the double-edged sword thing because every now and then I come across like true hermits, like stuff on
Uh
the
huh.
internet where it'll be some guy that's lived up in the wilderness by himself. And I
Mm-hmm.
think my conclusion's similar to yours. Like I kind of hope that you come across other van lifers every now and then, and you guys are people who live on the road. And I wonder if one day you're like, someday I'll probably dig my roots in somewhere or something like that, and that you have a community through the online and everything like that. But I see what you're saying there, like the double-edged sword thing, like because in my own spiritual practice, I've practiced purposely going off on my own. Like Christmas just went by, and I did
Mm-hmm.
this weird experiment of like instead of going to every single event that happened over the holidays, I would like go to one and then not go to one and like feel the absence or whatever from
Sure.
that. I've done that periodically in my life. It's not a hardcore retreat, but I think it can just unplugging from the normal flow everybody else is in provides a ton of insight. But at the end of the
Totally.
day, as humans, we like physiologically need each other. You
Right.
know what I mean? So even if, you know what I mean, it can nourish you probably just to go in and to a store and interact with the cashier a little bit. I hope
Absolutely. And I
I'm
do
not
that.
being inappropriate here, but
Not at all. Not at all.
yeah,
And it's funny running into other. So I do run into a lot of other people on the road. They're typically much older retirees, or
yeah.
there's like I remember in Nebraska, there's like a lot of Germans that like older Germans that are there's a highway you can drive that goes all the way from um like Boston all the way to California or something, like not nonstop break. And there's people doing that. But it's funny, like there's been a 4 or 5 times where like older lonely women have like come on to me. Like, and I have to be like some are pretty brash, some are pretty brazen. Like, do you have a girlfriend? I'm just gonna like, oh no, and but it's something you have to manage. But again, what with the insight thing is, I mean, I forget what I was watching. It was some Buddhist teacher, I forgot who it was, said like, if you're not directly confronting the dark things in your mind, you're not going to grow anyway. And so a good way to do that is to go out alone and be lonely and
Yeah.
let that stress come up.
100%. And even some of the
Yeah.
things that happen from what I'm going to classify it as a little bit of shadow work, which is bound to
Sure.
start happening when in isolation. I've done it. Um, some of the behaviors that come out of you as that's
Mm,
unwinding are probably better to not be around other people if it's not like a facilitated retreat. It's one thing if you're with a bunch of people that are doing the same thing and they're all letting that happen, but something about when you're on and then you're kind of venturing into shadow work, you might start shaking, you might start crying uncontrollably. Like I don't
Totally.
know.
Oh, there's been
Whatever you've been suppressing is probably what's going to come out.
a lot of tears, and a lot of. So yeah, I went through an interesting. This is interesting you bring that up. So during those 11 years of caregiving, there's sort of like a lot of suppression's sort of the wrong word, but a lot of like needs that are not getting met. Because you're just in this life, you have those responsibilities. It's like having an infant that never grows up, and like it's years and years of that build up, and you see your friends going off, starting families, starting companies, doing stuff, and you're not doing that, right? And so, I think inevitably, those parts of us that are human, and you might say unresolved, but I don't mean that in a pejorative way. Um, that starts to accumulate, and you don't really see it. So those kind of become delusions after a while, and like things that are like not again like not resolved. And then when you're out there, exactly like you're saying, those things kind of come up to the surface
Yes. Yeah.
and to be processed. And yeah, there's been a lot of tears and a lot of moments where I was like, oh man, why was I thinking that? Or it's like I and that stuff. And it doesn't even have to be as extreme as shaking or anything like that. It can just be like, oh, what do you do for comfort when your mind gets dark? And
Yeah.
watch what happens.
Yeah.
Reaching for
Yeah.
your phone, wanting to text that ex-girlfriend, like all this stuff where it's just like this is just discomfort and stress.
Yeah.
But the mind are we habitually, even like you go to the bathroom, you can't afford to be bored for 30 seconds. You take your phone in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that kind of stuff. And you don't see it unless you're exposing your mind to scary stuff that's down there.
And it's accelerated too. There's more and more of it,
Absolutely.
man. It's like when
Yeah.
like I think we forget like just 20 years ago how, it wasn't you had to go to a TV to watch a TV. It wasn't on in your hand 24/7.
Yeah.
Like and it's like wow. I wonder like where do you see this going? Where what do you especially with AI and everything now too? Like what like
Yeah.
where are we headed with this?
It's a good question. I mean, so some a bright spot that's come out of this that I wasn't really expecting. So I avoided, especially during those caregiving years, I avoided social media like the plague because I knew the instant that I opened it up, it's going to be this person got married, this person sold their company, this person had this awesome trip. And so my perception of like Instagram and TikTok was like this sort of toxic comparison environment, which if you use it a certain way, it is. But what I've seen with my TikTok is I'm making like awesome friends. Like I'm using I don't really
Mm,
browse on it.
mhm.
I just like will put a video up and people reach out to me and be like, "Hey, I like your stuff." And it's sort of like this one of my intentions with this content is to sort of get away. I'm trying to avoid as much as possible and being indulgent in terms of like showing off and making people envious and things of that nature. And I going back to what we are talking about before we came on is like I think people are sick of this, man. People are getting sick of living a virtual life that they don't like. I don't. I think we're in a kind of very scary tailspin as a culture, and I'm not seeing an end to it. I think things are getting worse, and I'm just doing my best to give people like, hey, things are going down the drain, things are circling the drain. But if you can maintain a perspective, if you can train your perspective to see things clearly, you can get through it. We can get through it as a culture. But I agree with you, man. It's scary having, and it's also scary how many like, especially here in the U.S., you have poor families, people that can't afford childcare, and all they do, they just give their kid an iPad, and then they become like stuck with this mindset of needing the iPad for security or for comfort.
Mm.
And there's going to be a generation of people that are hitting our culture that have been conditioned in this way. And it's scary, man. On a personal level, I don't know much else you can do than just be kind and prepare and try to practice for it and do the best you can.
I
But
think
I totally
a
go ahead.
possible thing that might sorry if
No, I'm
I
done. You
jump
can go
in
ahead.
here. I think like a possible thing that may happen is that yeah, for some people it'll get worse and it's a real circle in the drain situation for like a lot of different things.
Hmm.
But like all that time on the phone, also they would come across you, or they come across friggin' a clip of Osho saying something that clicks. Like I think there's opportunity with all this access
Right.
to phones that opens windows that somebody otherwise would have had to like go to a library and find. I just see this like sort of homeostatic nature to reality. Like things seem
Mm,
to like they get crazy and then they balance out to a certain degree, you know?
the ebb and flow. Yeah, I saw an interesting clip, I don't know, from a congressman. It might have been this morning or yesterday, talking about the printing press and how apparently right after I didn't know this, apparently right after the printing press came out, like a bunch of wars started because the information got out there immediately.
Yeah.
So the initial injection of the printing press was you might say a sort of destructive sort of event. Um, and it could be like you're alluding to, it could be we're in that part of the process with this transition.
Yeah. Yeah. For
And
many
it could,
things,
yeah,
like I
many
think,
things. Yeah.
especially with AI exacerbating everything, I think that there's some things that are a lot of people are agreeing are like, oh shit, shit's about to hit the fan in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But I think as humans, we're like incredibly resilient over that. Like when you look at one of the things you should use AI for if you're going to use it is go do a deep dive into what all of human history was like to like 200 years
Oh
ago.
yeah.
It's like you'd be very grateful for where you are now.
Totally.
And I'm not trying to be like a smartass. I just think that sometimes you talk to people and they're like, I think everything's going to resolve and we're headed to a mass awakening worldwide. And then some people think that things are headed towards like the apocalypse. And I'm kind of just presenting the idea that maybe it'll be, an apocalypse for some
Mhm.
and heaven for some, depending on where your attention goes. You know what I mean? Like very hard. Some nuts are very hard to crack. You know what I mean? When
Totally.
somebody's like, life is about me conquering you. You know what I mean? You're like,
Yeah.
shit, what am I gonna do? Nothing I can say. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
I wonder, like, I feel this sort of sense of foreboding, and I feel like I sense it in other people, but I wonder if that's just the way people always feel, once
I
they
know,
get older.
yeah. Subtle
So,
foreboding, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I think it's weather in the system. Like I'm sure you've come across this term because all three of us walk in spiritual circles. But the term of I find it so helpful that it didn't used to be, but only recently I find this analogy helpful where it's this emotions and feelings like that, foreboding or sort of general anxiety can be perceived as like weather moving through the system. And oftentimes,
Mhm.
if you do sit, you're like, it did pass. It did sort of like pass through my system, you know?
I mean, that's literally so from the Buddhist perspective, that's literally no different than weather, because from the Buddhist perspective, there's no separate self
Yeah.
and everything is impermanent. And so every phenomena that the body is experiencing, the mind's experiencing, is literally no different
Yeah.
than leaves from a tree or clouds in the sky.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with that.
I think it can be helpful if you can some people right away, nope, not dealing with not even any bad feelings. But that's how I lived most of my life. Most of
Mm.
my life was in distraction, you know?
Oh yeah.
Well, it's also just people aren't prepared for the intensity sometimes.
Yeah.
Like someone like I have family members who I don't think they would be able to handle sitting alone for 20 minutes just because they've been so conditioned to not let themselves ever let their mind get scary or dark at all. And those when those things come up, I mean it could be very intense in the body and very intense in the mind. So
Yeah.
um yeah. So I'm with you. Like it's best to train yourself to allow yourself to feel those feelings, but some that's a big step for a lot of people.
I'm worried sometimes. Like I used to be a little more reckless in my frustration, but I think part of getting
Mm-hmm.
older is it's not even a spiritual thing. I think part of getting older
Mm-hmm.
is kind of settling down into who you just are. You know what I mean? Like some of your own temperaments coming to a reconciliation with your literal like biological temperament.
Yeah.
But when I was younger, I was a big proselytizer, and even on this show, we've
Mm-hmm.
got tomes of videos where I'm proselytizing. And but I recently I'm going, well, what use is it? Like I used to think like, well, I'd rather get the truth into you and you become catatonic because of it
Mm-hmm.
than you continue to go around hurting everybody. But I'm
Yeah.
realizing something about that, like that's an ego. That was my own issue. Like, I demand truth and transparency. That's my own karmic shit that I
Mm-hmm.
actually had to let go of a little bit. or I'm working on letting go, I suppose, still.
Yeah, yeah. What I mean, whenever that always points to something unresolved in ourselves,
Yeah.
right? Whenever we feel like we have to change the external
Yeah.
world,
Yeah. Oh
um,
yeah. Yeah.
always. And I definitely went through that phase where I started having like really powerful experiences of real insight, real breakthroughs, and just telling everyone, "Oh, dude, you got to meditate. You got to do this." And you end up sounding like that annoying guy,
I know. I
like
know.
what's different? Like you're the guy at the party that everyone's avoiding because you're just talking about
Yeah.
meditation all the time.
Yeah.
So you're actually not serving the cause at all doing that anyway, right?
I think it's a phase. Like I think it's
It's a
literally
phase.
the John the Baptist phase or something. Like you got tattered rags, you're in a potato sack on the fringes of society. But you know what I mean? Like I think that
Yes.
there's a
Yeah.
return. I think that there's a return, no matter whether you're a traveling man or you're rooted in some town or something like that. I think that
Hmm.
there's a little bit of like a return once the therapy and catharsis is completed enough, and then there's a return back to like I don't need to be a full hermit right now. I can come down from the mountains and interact with the people.
Yeah, and I'm on one of my first, might have been my very first retreat. I had been considering starting a YouTube channel, and I getting kind of deeper into the mind and thinking like, okay, is this coming from a place of me wanting to help, or from a place of me wanting to show what I know,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
me
yeah.
wanting people to be impressed with me?
Hmm.
And what the one of the teachers said is like, you also can't extract yourself from the culture that you exist in, right? So if we exist in this Western culture where the way that we show our worth is by demonstrating how we have original ideas and individual achievements that are good, it doesn't reflect poorly on you necessarily that you, in this capitalist system, that you want
Capitalize on
to capitalize on it. Exactly.
it.
Exactly. So, but I think, as you mature, you start to see like, okay, even if I do capitalize on it, what is the value of that ultimately? And
Yeah.
it's some temporary thing that doesn't matter anyway. So
Well, you
eventually
bring
you get,
up, yeah, no, you bring up a good point though, but it's like, how far? Because one of the things we talk a lot about on our channel is like the
mhm,
competitive nature of things, right?
sure.
And it's like, it seems to be like on one hand, it has allowed humanity to achieve so many things, our competitive nature. And then on the other end of things, it's caused so much pain, neglecting the needs of others while
Hmm.
we strive, for some ultimate image of what we think we should be, to society. So what do we do? What do we do with this competitive drive within us? Or how do we
Mm.
supposed to manage this?
It's a good question. I mean, even it's I think for one thing, when I see it in myself, I just try to laugh at it. Like I actually went through a phase, my first few retreats where I was just like competitively meditating,
Yeah.
like being the first person to sit and the last person to get up when the bell
Yeah.
rings, like that kind of thing.
Yeah. It's so
Um,
silly, but we've all
it's
been there.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I think it's something that we just have to, like we are talking about before, like understand that it's a constraint of the system, right? Like
Mhm.
talking about this like from the engineering perspective, like competitive human beings are going to be competitive, and we've had some wisdom already in our culture where we like, okay, let's channel that into sports, let's channel that into that, but there's ways that can be that can be dark, and unproductive. Something that you're alluding to there is, the political situation is getting kind of crazy, and one really um, prominent voice in the culture. He's not a part of it, but he writes about it. Is Jonathan Haidt? I don't know if you're familiar with him,
I think I've
but
heard the name.
I go. So I used to go to my meditation center here in Sacramento, Buddhist Insight Center. Um, and after the election, there was just like it's a very like Western Buddhism is probably 85-90% like pretty liberal leftist kind of people. Um, and so some of the teachers were very upset for months after the election. Um, and one of the teachers had one whole talk about how we're experiencing like I forget what she called it, moral injury or something, and what the Buddha said about moral injury. And one of the guys in the group um, spoke up and was like, I don't think it's appropriate that we only hear one political voice in the Sangha.
Yeah.
And she agreed. And one thing that I've been reflecting on is sort of the immune system of like the political side, where it's like the wisdom of conservatives is that order is very hard to achieve. Human beings are sort of flawed, and we need to compensate for that with
Yeah.
systems.
Yeah.
And then the wisdom of the left is, okay, these systems don't work for everybody. People are getting left behind. We don't all start at the same place. We got to try new stuff. So I see it as sort of a symbiotic relationship where
Yeah.
the left is injecting new ideas, for example, injecting Buddhism and yoga and Eastern philosophy, like, hey, these things work really well. Let's try them out. And then, but you have to be prepared for a lot of those things to not work, and you have to be humble about that. So you have to like
Yeah.
also compensate for um, when things are not going to work. So I think we lose perspective. There's duality. There's a yin and yang. We can't get too heavy on one side or the other.
Feels like the scale's so off kilter with liberalism and conservative because I hear exactly what you're saying. It seems like every time it shifts to the next side, it's getting higher and higher and higher. Every time it's going, it's like, what's happening?
Yeah.
It's like,
Eh,
what about the center?
Yeah. And it's, but the weird thing is, right? The weird thing is like you walk around, if I walk around town here, it's a college town, but it's a kind of conservative area. Everyone I talk to is friendly and nice and reasonable. And then I get on my phone and everyone is extreme.
Yeah.
And it's like, how is this happening? It just I don't fully understand it yet. Um, but yes, I think everybody wants balance, but somehow we're not finding it.
Well, the way I feel like prior to, I don't know, I feel like we've gone through chunks where it was a liberal uh environment and we saw like the results of that. I really like the way you described the conservative way of like how constraint works and the real risks and why that's not like foolish to be and stuff
Right.
like you gave a good defensive conservative mindset, right?
Right.
And I'm not a liberal and I'm not a conservative. I don't think I kind of like the idea of seeing both and yeah, they can go out of whack. So many things go out of whack and then kind of return and then go way historically. We've got things where one regime or another has gone crazy.
Yeah.
But I think that there's probably figures every now and then that are categorizably like maybe they're even like low key a liberal, but their avenue is conservatism, and they keep an eye on that. They're aware of what would make us turn into like a some kind of hellish political landscape, and so that like there's more than just three people solving the world's problems. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And,
totally.
and there's people out there with their eye on some of these things. And it's just scary because we all have a history and we have a human history. We have an inborn history. We know how bad it can be and how bad betrayal can hurt and everything. But I think that there's something to be said about like also the fact that it's not dependent on you. If the like you could probably remove one person from the earth and the world would be even figure it out.
Yeah,
Um,
that's something I'm coming to terms with myself, is just like how I'm really not that important.
yeah,
Like I'm, and that's tough. It's a tough pill to swallow for someone who I've something that I've learned about myself through my practice is that for a long time, most of my adult life, if not all of it, I've just relied on ambition as a coping mechanism.
yeah,
Like working my way to
yeah,
something better than what's happening right now.
yeah,
Um, and that's just folly. Like you got to work to live. You got to work for your community and for your employer and for your friends and family. It's very important, but there's a limit to that before now it becomes pathological.
yeah.
And I've gotten much deeper in my practice, become a much better and more effective meditator by relaxing and learning to let go.
Yeah, yeah, and like I saw this Tony Robbins clip forever ago, and it was this guy that showed up to the Tony Robbins thing with his wife, and his wife is like ostensibly a hippie. Like she looks like a hippie, and I think he even had some hippie shit on him. And Tony
Mm-hmm.
Robbins like was like, you, and he like zoned in on them, and he was like started like t the woman like wanted to say something. He was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And he started talking to the guy, and he was like he kept like through a series of questions, he deduced that this guy had been accommodating his hippie wife and sort of denying things that were authentic to himself. And so he was like, Tony Robbins was like, once there was this little lion cub, and the lion cub lost its way, and next thing it knew, it was surrounded by a bunch of sheep. And so it adopted the mannerisms of the sheep and it started to blight and blah and do what the sheeps do. And then an old lion came through and said, "What are you doing?" And it was like, all it could do was go, "Bah, I'm a sheep or whatever." And so the old lion took it to a puddle of water or some water and he was like, "Look at you. You're a lion. Now roar." And Tony Robbins got the guy to roar and he was like,
Oh, that's
"Ah."
cool.
And it was this kind of like reclaiming of a totally different energy that this guy had been
Hmm.
suppressing, and it was like making him visibly meek. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so he embodied back this vitality. And I think
Hmm.
from a certain perspective, whether it's liberal or conservative or competitive versus aloof or whatever the hell it is, there's a way of looking at things soundly and groundedly and be like, "Oh, I see what people are up to. I see some of the patterns that fall through and the function of a lot of these different things. Like, who's the best person to control, to protect us from psychopaths? You know what I mean? Are the Care
Yeah.
Bears or like somebody that
Right.
knows how to take down an animal? You know what I mean? And it doesn't mean we can't make the system better and
Sure.
develop systems to accommodate these things and figure out where to healthily corral all that energy. But I wanted to touch back on that. I had that story in my head about Tony Robbins because I loved that at the time. You know what I mean? Like this guy like shaking off his hippie shit and like, "I'm a man, God damn it." You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's not everybody's story. Like some people's story is you've been pretending to be aggressive when really your heart is one of like receptivity and softness or something like that, or somewhere in the middle, or you know what I mean? And so momentarily, maybe that guy walked around with a little bit of an exaggerated male ego, but in the end, maybe he balanced out and had an equanimity of male, female, or whatever energy going on.
Hmm.
Some
A
sort of balance
balance.
happened in the end. Like
Hmm.
even the extreme things seem to happen for some purpose that settles down in the end into like a new result.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. I think something that happened in our culture. I was talking, so I took a trip up to Washington a few months ago. That's where I grew up near the border of Canada. And my uncle and my dad are both pretty hippie boomers. Um, and something that like I don't think maybe has occurred to that generation is that they have been in power now for like 30 or 40 years, right? And like
Mm.
they came of age in the 60s and 70s where there was like this movement towards the feminine, this movement away from these rigid structures,
Yeah.
towards being more inclusive, towards be more adaptive to um, people that are less fortunate, or towards women, people that don't have opportunities. And I think a lot of them have don't understand like the world they grew up in is long gone, long gone. And so a lot of there's I think for a lot of them there's still sort of this boogeyman of like this this church going guy that might march with the KKK at night and is like oppressing people and wants Jim Crow laws back and stuff. And I think no one in the younger generations, oh, they all find that disgusting. And I think part this story just reminded me of that because it just is a reminder like the culture we live in, there's stuff happening that's invisible to us.
Mhm.
And if for this particular person, um he might be running with his wife's crew that are all very involved in a particular way of seeing the world from a hippie feminine perspective. um and he might just be conditioned like that. And so I
Mhm.
I, I try to remind people all the time, like, we have no idea, like, another culture sees us, they see something very differently than we see ourselves,
Yeah.
and having a fixed view on anything is not going to help.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Uh,
And like I just want to be clear about some things like I think there's some real concerns right now in the political landscape and with the wars going on. Like I'm not pro war. I think there's got to be a better solution than even what seems to be beyond the reach of like the UN. Man, UN can't do anything. You know what I mean? Like that it's
mhm.
too small of a war or something like that. I don't know a ton about this stuff, but when it
Me either.
enters my field, I'm like, I don't think that's okay. I did this to me, we gotta be better than like children blasted out of their homes. Like that's, but I'm not negating the forces and the stuff that's been driving humanity for thousands of years. like real drives within us. Like I'm not like
Hmm.
seeking some overnight magical cure to that. I think it's like understanding could be helpful for all of us if it abounds, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Um, and
Yeah.
and um, and yeah, I just think different people clearly carve out unique paths for themselves, like distinct paths, you know? Like not everybody's suitable to the same thing. I remember at one point
Hmm.
they were talking about with the police in our area, they were talking about more distinct roles for cops. So instead of having the same highway officer that pulls you over, you know what I mean? Showing up to like a sensitive domestic situation, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like maybe this guy's best for kicking doors in or with, you know what I mean? Like
Sure.
raids,
There's
but
value
that's
to
not
that. Yeah.
necessarily the same guy that's good for
Right.
dealing with something that requires some gentleness. I don't know. I'm not trying to judge uh, the way police
Sure.
do things, but I'm saying that I think that we can't ignore the reality of things, which is sometimes when I get the vibe of like the aging hippie or something like that, that's got like Trump, what do they call it? Trump dementia? What is
Derangement
it?
Trump
syndrome.
derangement syndrome.
Trump derangement. Like
TDS. Yeah.
Trump's a real thing. He's a real thing, and I do think that we all got to like do, you know, understand this and deal with it. Hopefully, there's some people around that can keep things in control. But at the end of the day, like, what really does put food on the table globally? What
Right.
really is making it possible for some people to live high on the hog and some people to not? And is there a way we can? It's already pretty remarkable how much of the world's hunger we've obliterated when you look at human history. Like most of human history, from what I've seen, was like most people were starving. There's like a really small percentage of people that weren't like almost starving to death. And then we've, for the most part, covered world hunger. That's huge. You know what
It
I mean? I
is.
don't know all the things. Somebody in the comments might be like, "What are you talking about?" But I get the sense that we've come a long way in a lot of different ways. And let's just not ruin it by going too crazy.
Yeah.
Let's still be keep in mind people are different. They have different temperaments and different jobs they're good at, and not to negate that. If you go to somebody that's by their nature competitive and aggressive and you just tell them they're wrong for being that way, even at all,
You're
that
wrong.
seems like
Yeah.
you could damage them. Like you might make them go
Totally.
crazy, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. While you were speaking, I mean, tying this back to the spiritual perspective, I think there's this misunderstanding that spirituality is like accommodating and there for your comfort and is sort of like because it's associated with hippies and associated with like LSD and things like that, that it's by its nature this sort of like kind of flowery thing. And you know, I've practiced with monastics and they are hardcore. They sleep on the ground.
Mm,
They get up at
yeah.
5 a.m. They eat once a day. They sit for hours and hours and hours. Like there's nothing like soft about that at all.
Hmm.
And I think people kind of get so I totally agree in that I think our associations with perhaps masculinity or order and structure and aggression, I think they've gotten a little bit too stigmatized. Um, and I mean I think spirituality is at least for me, it's the way of balancing, you know. And there are certain states you can get, certain states of mind you can get into where there's no gender there. It's just like perception,
This
you
is a
know.
game. This is a game, and
It's the
we're all
game.
seem to be playing it because
Game.
I can
Yeah.
think of how it could go wrong if like we're like, well, we don't like what the big bad meanie did when when he was out of control and unchecked. But it's like
Mm,
some serious things can go wrong if things are overly sentimental and like overly like naive to what the
right.
world is like too. Like we're kind of beating a dead horse now,
Yeah.
but 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 you know what I mean? Like I think we're all kind of
Yeah.
advocates for some kind of clear-headed balance here. Seems
I
like
am.
to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't even classify myself as my enemy. Like I don't see myself as the same type of aggressor that I might be criticizing or something like that, or defending even. Like it's
Mm,
like I'm not defending it so that I can go off and be that way. I get irritated sometimes when somebody's like overly machismo, like when somebody's clearly like found their thing and now they're belittling people for not being like
mm.
them. You know what I mean? Like, come
Yes.
on, what's your problem? Just be 6'4" and have a head that looks like a block. What's your problem? You know what I mean? Like I'm not into that either.
Sure. Yeah.
I had something I wanted to ask you. Just to
Sure.
transition here, I don't want to forget the point. In your story, you were talking. You had this thing where you were talking about how up and you went to this retreat, and up until
Hmm.
that moment, like you had some ideas about the spirituality thing and meditation, and then all of a sudden there was a shift in you where it
Hmm.
became like, oh, this is way more real than I thought it was. And I was hoping that maybe you could talk about that point.
Oh, I would love to. I would love to. I mean, that's sort of been the defining moment, like even more so than caregiving in my life so far. There's a before that retreat and after that retreat.
Mm.
And I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with Buddhist meditative practices. Um,
A little bit.
but but so we generally in Buddhism we have two different practices or types of practice. We have concentration practice, also called samatha, which is where you're just getting the one pointed focus of mind, where everything aligns around a single point of focus. Everything else kind of disappears. And then you have insight practice, where you use the mind that's been supple and trained to then investigate reality. And those insight practices are the ones that eventually lead to nirvana and liberation. Well, um, so there's these types of practice called jhana meditation, Jhana, jhana, um, which are concentration practices where the mind becomes so focused. It's called a meditative absorption, where your mind gets absorbed into its object, where like the body disappears, sense of space disappears, time disappears, and it's associated with just transcendental bliss and just overwhelming bliss. And really, what's happening is the mind is just shedding all of the things that are not the self, and seeing that clearly. And so I went on this retreat, and I was in like a super bad place mentally. Actually, I think a month before that, 6 weeks before that. So I was reading this book, Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha by Daniel Ingram. Um, we can talk about I have some reservations about recommending it, but we can talk about. But one thing that he mentioned in this book was it's better if you have a serious practice. He would recommend actually, let's say you have 2 hours a day to dedicate to practice. He would say it's more effective to practice a half hour a day and then go on retreat for a month or 2 weeks than to practice 2 hours a day, because you get that concentrated um, effect. And on retreat, what happens is you don't make eye contact with people, you don't talk to people. Everything is silent. You eat meditatively and slowly. You're mindful. You walk. So if you count eating and walking, you're basically meditating almost all day, 14 hours a day. And the conditions are perfect for meditation.
Sounds like Vipassana.
Yeah, well, so the place I went to was called Spirit Rock, which is an insight meditation. But Vipassana is the Pali word for insight.
Mm.
So you might be referring to like the Goenka
Yeah, yeah.
10-day retreats, and those are sort of like a by donation free version. What their practices there are very specific. Like you don't move for however long you sit, 2 hours, whatever it is. And then I think you do 3 days of breath meditation and then 7 days of body scan meditation in those ones. Um, uh, uh, the retreat experience is the same. It's just the practices are sort of different. Um, but so I went on this retreat and I had read about these jhana absorptions where it's like ego death kind of things. And they said the best place to do this is on retreat. So I said, okay, I'm going to try to do this. And so we were doing loving kindness meditation, metta meditation. And before I start that, I made one short clip up on TikTok about something that was maybe the most transformative part of that experience. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but I the first night that you get there to the retreat, you come in and you pick your spot in the hall. There's about 100 places you can sit. And the first night the teachers come in and there's this welcoming ceremony where they welcome you and they're like, we don't care what your background is, we don't care what you've done in your life, what color your skin is, if you grew up rich or poor, you are welcome here. And I actually burst into tears at that moment because I couldn't remember the last time that I had felt that way, that I had been given that kind of welcome where you can
Explicitly welcome.
show up as you are without having to perform at all. In fact, we don't want you to perform. We want you to just be who you are. And I was like, maybe when I was 5 at my great grandma's house, like that's the
Yeah.
last time, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, a lot of adults may have never had that. They may have
Mhm.
never had a place where they went and they were encouraged to be exactly who they are, like not in like a toxic positive way, but
Yeah.
like in a genuine like
Yeah.
be who you are in my presence and it's fine. So we're meditating all of this time, and then like 2 or 3 days in, I'm doing metta meditation, and I'm trying to remember the instructions for doing these jhana practices, and I'm meditating, and I just like there's this shoop, and I just go into this place, and they're just my body's just exploding with radiating with bliss and joy. And I'm like, oh, maybe this is it. And then when I came out, everything had changed. Like everything was different. Um, my sense of self was gone. There was no boundary between me and the person next to me. And then we started doing. So this was a Brahma Vihara retreat. So the Brahma Viharas are a set of practices in Buddhism. Brahma Vihara means heavenly abode. That's what it translates to. But it starts with metta, which is loving kindness, and then you have karuna, which is compassion, mudita, which is joy, and upekkha, which is equanimity. And there are different ways to kindle this kind of um, these states of mind, basically, and you practice kindling those, and they become states of mind. And I was just like I was having compassion for people in my life that I'd never had compassion for, and I just seeing them from this new perspective that I had. And this was like I was at this point probably 8 years into caregiving, 9 years, not knowing if that was ever going to end, not if that's going to be my life forever. And just sort of I had resolved a month before that retreat, like, okay, if my life is just going to be suffering and being alone and isolated until I die, then that's what it's going to be. And I think just setting that resolution sort of opened the door to this new experience. And after that retreat, I just knew everything's going to be okay. Like, I know for a fact I have this place, this refuge I can go to in my mind.
Hmm.
And then, and having that, I was like, I want other people to know about this. And then I started going to my local meditation center. And from that point forward, I had been like a serious practitioner, but from that point forward, my life has actually been built around practice.
Wonderful. And so your day-to-day life, like maybe this is a sort of a clunky question, but for the people watching that are interested, like would you say that you have found some sort of abiding awareness that maybe wasn't there like through these practices? Is it like something has switched over that is now
Totally.
with me, that I carry now with me and going forward? Like I'm not really backstepping. So
No,
since the
yeah.
answer is totally right off the cuff, does
Mhm.
that negate the odd ego flare up? Can you
Oh,
can
no,
you?
all the time.
I love
Yeah.
it. I love it. Thank you.
Oh,
A human, not an alien.
oh no, absolutely not. I mean, I mean, on a daily basis, I
Yeah.
like until you're fully enlightened, that's just going to be a thing. And and and
See, yeah.
and even then, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Sorry.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and even then, and I talk about this sometimes with people, they have misconceptions about ego. Like ego is not an enemy. Ego is just like your body's operating system for the world. And that's not, it's a naturally occurring phenomenon
Hmm.
that you just gain perspective of where it's not appropriate or where it's not going to be helpful. And I say like meditation demotes your ego from CEO to advisor, where before it's running the show all the time, including places where it's not supposed to be. And then afterwards, you'd be like, okay, ego, what do you think about this? Oh, okay, that makes sense. Let's do that. Or actually, that's not appropriate.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that there's probably like good reasons why it doesn't always get communicated the way you said it, but we're here to be a little do what we want, punk fringe. And even if we leave the path of like, what masters know how to like the steps to lead people through, I think some people out there need to hear that even after an awakening experience and even after a sort of abiding like a decentralized ego state where it's like the ego's not the CEO anymore. It's still there, like a personality or
Totally.
whatever. But I see these clusters of thoughts and I'm less reactive and I'm not sitting around in torment the way I once was and like absolutely driven and puppeteered towards distraction the way I once was. But I think that if that's not good enough for the listener, I've also heard it could get deeper. That you literally can, over years, it's like, yeah, maybe there'll be some leftover reactivity, or you'll be pulled into some kind of thought thing, and you'll be like, what am I doing? The CEO is like, got behind the boss's desk again. He's got his feet on that thing. You know what I mean? Like, oh, but I also learned that it can deepen and then actually maybe return to sort of what you talked about at that retreat where it's like, whoa, my field of interpretation of the things around me is that I'm there's no separation from the people, which I
Mhm.
would assume is very synonymous with high empathy, high compassion and empathy type feelings, but
Totally,
I don't really
absolutely.
know.
I mean, people have described, so the practice I was doing is called metta, and people have described it as basically like being on MDMA. And
Yeah.
I would agree with that assessment. And a couple of things there. So the abiding awareness is not an addition. It's the things that were preventing you from seeing it have been are gone,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So the layers of reactivity and the automatic patterns that were sucking the energy away and blocking your view of it have been cut through, so and released so that they're gone. So it's just basically like whereas before your mind would automatically jump from thought to thought and clank grab onto things, you just that process just gets diminished over time. Now going back to the reactivity thing, um my teacher is Shyla Catherine, and she's amazing. And the reason I sought her out was because after this experience, I started practicing with the local Insight Center, the local Vipassana Center in Sacramento. The teachers are amazing. That I consider them family. They're great, but they don't practice concentration. They don't practice jhana. They only do Vipassana. And I was like, okay, I want to master this stuff. I want to get good at it. So looked around in the area in California, and she's in the Bay Area, and this is Northern California, so like 3 or 4 hours away. And I signed up for a retreat with her. And first I was very intimidated by her because she's very renowned. She's like, I don't know if you would call her famous, but she's very renowned she's like up there. What like she shares the stage with like the top monks in the world when she goes on like teaching and stuff. So and she has more than 9 years of silent retreat practice. So I was intimidated by her. But one of these retreats, somebody asked her, so in Buddhism, there's in Theravada Buddhism, which is what I practice, there's four levels of enlightenment. So you have stream entry, which are people who have seen Nibbana once, and then there's once returners, so people like the layer above that, where greed and ill will get severely diminished, where it takes a lot to trigger them. And then a non-returner, where those are gone forever, and then an arahant, which is effectively a Buddha, um, has no self. There's no conceit. There's no I forming ever. There's never any ill will. And there's a few other characteristics. Um, and so somebody asked her if she's ever met an arahant, and she said, I don't know. And bear in mind, she's been taught by like people that if they're not fully enlightened, then nobody is kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason she says she doesn't know is because when she was in training with Pa'ak Sayadaw, who's as far as I know, like the most rigorous meditator in the world in terms of his systems, and she was taught by him. Um, so she was one of the first, if not the first, Westerner to complete his training that he teaches to his monastics in Burma. Um, that first Westerner, and she said, so when you're reporting to Pa'ak, you're just telling him your experiences, and then if you've had a nibbana or nirvana experience, he just tells you, okay, the only way you know now is to watch the defilements. So, and it's kind of a punitive word, but a defilement in Buddhism, it's basically just uh, a part of the mind that is creating distortions, which create the suffering. And so, if you're getting triggered, that's because it's triggering a defilement in the mind. That's basically
Mm-hmm.
causing you to act out, causing reactivity.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, you know, she was just being frank. Like, I think I've been at the second stage of enlightenment for a few years, but every now and then something will trigger me, and I'm like, damn, I guess I wasn't at that level. I guess I wasn't that far. And she said that it's unwise. For one thing, monastics in Buddhism are not they're not allowed to claim any level of enlightenment to lay people, to outsiders. They can to each other just because they have to. Um, so like if a monk claims any level of enlightenment, then they get disrobed, so they can't continue. And I think that's a good rule. But basically, like they don't ever claim this rule is in place, so um you can never really claim a level of enlightenment because you don't know what triggers you're going to encounter. You don't know if that
Hmm.
reactivity is ever going to be triggered, and you don't know until you die. So
Hmm.
it's best to just I've had some really embarrassing moments with her where I asked her if like, was this nirvana, was, and she was just like, don't ask that question.
Yeah.
But basically, like, I've that's something I had trouble letting go of, was like, I have this Western mindset and I have this ambitious mind that's seeking comfort and security through achievement, and that's something you have to let go of. And so I've gotten better at it now, of just like letting her. I just report to her, I let her guide me, and I don't think, I'm not a stream enter. I haven't hit that first stage yet, but the reactivity has definitely decreased. Where it's definitely, there's things I'm like, oh, that used to trigger me, and it doesn't, and it won't ever. Whatever that was has been released, and it's usually through tears. It's usually, I'll
Mm.
be on retreat, I'll have some experience, some memory that'll come up, and you can see, it's really cool. You can see the mind's habitual desire to push it down or to react. You can see that in real time and relax that. And then when you relax it, whatever that dark thing was, whether it's a memory or something that, it's usually some pain that you've learned to use avoidance to deal with. When you disarm that, then you let the mind experience that original pain. Just basically just like therapy. And once you fully process that, that trigger is gone. And the cool part is that the energy that you were using to suppress that thing, or to deal with it, has now been released back to the mind and to the senses. So yeah, you kind of get permanent upgrades in your perception and your awareness.
Yeah. Have you ever had anything like super strange, like abstract and weird that you didn't even know was in your brain show up inside of those retreats or those long sits and be like, what the heck was that?
Um, so I could tell you about a couple experiences. Um, there's definitely been some suppressed memories. Like, there's definitely been some times where I'll have this really big opening, and following that, there'd be like some memories of like seeing my mom's body in the hospital, and seeing her body mangled, and seeing like stuff that I saw once and didn't know that I had pushed down, and then it came up. But I can tell you about a couple of experiences that I had meditating. One was, so I was trying to, so I was like on my second or third retreat, and I was like, oh, I can do these jhana practices. I want to do them, and I didn't know what I was doing. It's just like, I didn't have a good teacher at that point, so I was just going off of videos and books. May or may not have been good instruction. And I'm sitting there and I'm like pushing myself as hard as I can on the cushion, like, oh, like trying to clamp onto my object as hard as I can. And I'm like, okay, that didn't work. And I relaxed. And the instant that I relaxed, the instant I gave up, I was like, okay, the rest of this, I'm just going to do nothing. It was like something took over my body, and like focused on the breath. I've never done this practice officially, but like focused on the breath to such, it was such a constant focus. There was not a microsecond of distraction, was focused on that. And it was like, I don't know for how long, 5 or 10 breaths. And it just, I opened up into this space where there's this like white sphere just appeared and got massive, and just engulfed the entire room, and then engulfed me. And then I was just hanging out in this place where it was just whiteness. I don't know for how long. And then I came out of that, and then there's a kind of vipassana practice you can do where you look at the changing nature of sensations and changing nature of things. And usually you just go, you from like observation to observation. And this was like incredibly fast. Like, I was seeing like things pop in and out of existence, and I didn't know what this was, and then so the bell rings, and I get up and I go upstairs to do the walking meditation, and it was just as if the entire world was just like, had melted into like a flow state, where I just saw things becoming other things, and I was like, oh, this must be nirvana. It's one of those things where it's like, oh, this must be what that was. And but when I told my teacher that, she just kind of smirked and was like, don't get attached to it. And for me, it was like the most mind-blowing experience I ever had. And then I think it was that night, I'm in bed. I wake up at 3 a.m. just like, I wake up and I just start having these visions of these, like, it was kind of halfway between a waking and a dream. of like these giant flowers that are like the size of skyscrapers that are blooming in and out of existence. And I see this um like this hill made of gold with this river made of golden water in my mind. It was not exactly not exactly my mind's eye, not exactly a dream, but somewhere in between. And I asked my teachers, like, I wrote him an email what that was, and he never responded. So, like, I
I love it. The track record of your teachers dismissing those things, and I bet you know this, that there's like a difference between something that's going to be like we live in a culture of like I'm going to an ayahuasca retreat type culture, and then somebody comes back and like their hair's braided and they're wearing a 1960s hippie shirt and they can't wait to get to the party and tell everybody
right,
what they know now. You know what I mean?
right, right,
But I hear you, because I think so many of us on our journeys, like whether we've like literally tried psychedelics and had some ego breaking moments and stuff like that, like they're definitely profound and they mean
they
something. And
are.
I bet your
Mhm.
teachers are even sort of like gentle and understanding about that.
Totally.
But I think of all the things that have to come together for like the like converge for like a teacher that you're talking about. I was interested in when you were describing the levels, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And she was like, I don't even know if I've even met one like that.
Hmm.
And think about like what a teacher has to be. Like by nature, by character, they're kind of charismatic. Oh, interesting.
Hmm.
They're charismatic, so they're a stage dwelling creature where they everybody looking at them.
Right, right.
They're insulated, I bet you, a lot of the time. It's not like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying a garbage man can't be enlightened. I'm not saying a soldier can't be, like, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying the effect is different when you've got someone who, like, primarily people are like coming to with their questions and they're insulated. And when they do sit among people, it's on a stage with everybody looking up at them. It
Hmm.
just does matter. You know what I mean? I think
Totally.
it gets overlooked. So I actually think it's important, even if it like disgusts teacher, to hear people like the students actually getting together and talking. I really hope that it's comforting to someone that I think certain things have to be in place. You can definitely access this stuff. You know it, and I
For
think
sure.
we kind of know it, that you can access awareness. And some people talk in terms of black or white, all or nothing. Like, no, it's got to be one giant shift and that's that. It's like,
Mm.
well, sometimes that's a little mundane. Like sometimes it doesn't look like extreme, and sometimes it is a prolonged thing, and the ego oscillates or perception oscillates a little bit from ego identification to ego decentralization. Like that, all that stuff occurs, and in a teaching sort of what is it, like whatever the word is that means, like in a teaching sense, it gets it gets like overshadowed by like method and stuff like that. And so I think that there is something here. And that you not ought not feel bad if you don't share the same qualities as the person that's like been nominated to be the glowing angel one that everybody like holds in the separate thing. We're on the ground, man. We got to go deal with nasty people that are good. Like they won't let you
Mm.
go until you've signaled to them that you're screwed up too. All right. You know what I
Mm.
mean? You know what I mean? Like some people, like
Yeah.
literally, they don't understand you if you don't play a little bit of the game, and that it can feel like you're taking a step backwards, but you're really not. You know, it's just circumstance
Yeah, I
sometimes.
think I mean the reason that they do it is totally because the instant that you say you had the experience, the ego is going to claim that.
Yes.
And I know
Yes.
that's something you're
You
going
got
to
to be
have
real
to
vigilant about that. Yeah.
unpry that over time. And so
Yeah.
and there's been times with her where it's like she's like brutally honest with people. Um and I some of the retreat centers that I go to, like the practice meetings with the teachers are become more like group therapy, where people are like, because these things come up in retreat and people are
Hmm.
like, oh, I haven't thought about my brother that died 5 years ago, and it's coming up now. But when you sit with her, she just wants to hear about your practice and how your practice is going. And there's been people that are like in tears, and she's just like not accommodating that, not in a harsh way,
The original
but
Chat GPT. It's got all
sort
the
of.
answers with none of the emotion.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I've heard
yeah.
about it. I've heard that this is because I've asked ChatGPT. I was like, why does Osho come off like a cold sociopath? But people seem to like people that knew him are like they can't barely talk about him without crying. Some of them
Mm,
because it was that also that same thing that you said where they go, you're welcome completely the way you are. I'm not threatened by you. I'm not afraid of you. I just accept you. And you know what I mean?
It's
That
so
translate as love. That translate like love.
it's exactly what it is, and it's
Yeah.
so incredibly transformative. And one of the things that I've come to realize what love is just the perception of self and other disappearing, and that can happen in many different ways, right? When a mother loves their child, they don't perceive the child as separate from themselves, and that's
Mm.
really what the love is.
Hmm.
And what's interesting, if you think about it, is that um all that's happening in that is just a shift in perception, right? It's just that's her baby. She might like the neighbor's baby, she might have care for, but she doesn't love the baby the same way. But if you think about it, that's just some circuit in the brain or the mind or the nervous system that's been activated. And so if you can figure out a way to activate that for all people, then you can do it. And that's what these
Certain
practices are.
conditions I think apply. Like
Yeah.
it's bizarre because people have spontaneous enlightenments and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But for most people, the question is like, well, what can we do to recreate these conditions of enlightenment that lead to what I'm going to call love as equivalent to radical acceptance, like accepting. You know, what's a mother doing when she loves her baby unconditional? It's unconditioned. I love,
Right.
like, I can't even help but love you. You're part of
Right.
me. And
Yeah.
I think that for most of us that have been conditioned the opposite way, conditioned into like literally like speared into an arena to fight a tiger like a gladiator, we lost our inert our whatever the term is, our
Innate.
innate ability to like love like that. But through certain conditions, we can soften that, and you know. But think of the work that might take sometimes. Like for some people, of course, there's always freak situations and outliers and stuff like that. And some people are quick and some people are low. But if the understanding is there that like we can cultivate that, we can get, but first things first, we got to get you feeling safe. How are you supposed to go
Right.
around loving things that are, if you're
Uh,
convinced everything around you is your enemy, how are you supposed to get to that if that's how you feel physiologically? If we can get you utterly safe and utterly accepted, those things start to emerge from within, you know what I mean? And you can, the
yes.
parasympathetic system can chill out and then go figure. Now you got compassion for strangers
Yeah.
where otherwise you'd be super defensive.
I'm glad you said that. That's exactly what it is. So I was, so I, going on retreat is my favorite thing in the world now. Like I spend all my vacation days just going on retreat, just because what I describe it as is exactly what you're talking about. I'm glad you brought this up. Is it's basically like open nervous system surgery, where like imagine if you go in for brain surgery, what they're going to do, you're going to have a very highly trained person, several very highly trained people in a sterile environment where everything has been finely tuned and carefully crafted.
Yeah.
Nobody comes in that door that isn't supposed to be there. So it's the definition of safe. And this is spiritual safety, exactly like you're describing. All of the conditions have been perfectly formed for you to go in there and feel safer than you've ever felt in your life. And then you can do the real work of letting go of these things that
You're gonna see glowing balls sometimes, and you're gonna
exactly.
you might
Yeah.
literally have a nirvana event. You know what I mean? And
Yes.
here's the thing, I don't think that it is a consolation prize if like all you got was awakening. Like you want that. You know what I mean? You don't know what it's like to suffer and like to not be suffering. You know what I mean? Awakening is a good enough thing, but there are also peak states, and from what I understand, sometimes those peak states like can last a long time. But even if that's not part of it, you know what I mean? I think that's sometimes why the teachers downgrade those peak states because they're like,
That is why.
let's
Yeah.
focus on conscious awareness without being bullied by the ego in your head, you know what I mean? Which is
Right.
largely constructed by this culture, which is barbaric underneath the surface.
Oh yeah. Super
Yeah.
barbaric.
Is
Yeah.
there is there like a starter beginner ground for people out there? Like I know retreats can sometimes be intimidating, intense, and someone who's new to spirituality or
Mhm.
meditation and the things that we're talking about might be like, I'm not really ready for like a retreat. I'm not leaving my family, but what would you suggest for the newbies out there who are like they've accidentally stumbled across this video and they're hearing about this stuff for the first time? What do you say to those people?
Yeah, great question. Um, so as far as starting a practice goes, um, like me, I kind of sampled a bunch of stuff until I found something that worked, you know. Even just sitting quietly for a half hour, that's 90% of the work. Just and once you get used to doing that and get that in the habit and see what happens to the mind, then you can start doing more definitive practices. But I would say, I mean, I waited way too long to start practicing with other people. I
Mm,
tried a couple of different places, and I waited too long. Um, I mean, I was living in Sacramento. We have one here in Chico. If you don't feel too intimidated, go. I would recommend going to your local meditation center, um, and trying it out and talking to the people there. The reason I say that is a lot of these places, like this one here and the one in Sacramento, there's one here in Nevada City Mountain Stream. The first thing you could dip your toe into is a day long retreat where you
mm,
get there at 8 or 9 and you meditate until you're in silence until 4 or 5, and you get a taste of it.
mm,
And you can see what that's like, and that's typically oscillating between you're sitting for 40 minutes, walking for half hour, sitting for 40 minutes, and then there's a dharma talk where the teacher will talk about something, and then you'll have a lunch where you're eating in silence. um, so try that out, and I want to be very clear, um, that like I when I went on this retreat and had these experiences, I was like 12 years into my practice, practicing between at some points 3 hours a day, 1 to 3 hours a day. If you go in expecting to have that experience, you're going to be disappointed. So um, keep your expectations low. I will say you will there will be some permanent shift that happens. It might be, you might consider it minor, but there will be something in your mind that gets resolved that was unresolved before. How I got started as I just like watched YouTube and got books and practiced stuff till it found something till it resonated and stuck with that practice. Um, and the best way to start is just start like anything else. I'm sure you guys with this podcast, this YouTube show, you guys just started doing it, right? And you kind of learn as you go, and you feel it out. You feel what's right, and what your particular voice is too. Um, I would say like be patient with it. If there's an intro to meditation class, try that. Um, and I don't be I have friends that are afraid to go on retreat, and it's don't be afraid. Um, there's like we were saying, it's designed for you to feel safe. Um, and scary stuff is going to come up, and that's exactly the reason why we make it feel safe, because the scary stuff comes up, you see that it can't hurt you, you befriend it, and then it passes, and then you learn, then that becomes a skill that you take with you.
yeah, yeah, and I mean, I feel like it bears saying something like know what kind of retreat you're getting into because you might
Mm.
accidentally go to someone where it's like hardcore, you know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah,
But
yeah,
like that's its own thing. I'm not trying to diss
yeah.
that or something, but know what you're getting into because I've never been to a retreat like that, but I have spent a long time on my own in meditation and been met with people outside of my solitude that are quick to like be compassionate and understanding and not going to judge me. And
Mm-hmm.
to me, that I don't know, on a personal level, that's effective. And I think that if you had the wrong idea and you went someone that were like hitting you with a stick or something like that, and you know what I mean, like all you get is
Yeah, I mean,
gruel, you might be
that's
like terrified or something, you know?
yeah. So it's definitely, if definitely talk to the teachers, the people running it, to see if it's going to be one of those things.
Yeah.
Because I know in Zen that's kind of a thing that they do, where it's cultural thing from Japan or something, where you sit rigidly, and if you move, they come by and hit you on the shoulder with the stick. You know that, and in our practice, in Insight, Theravada, some of the sits, they're just like, make yourself as comfortable as you possibly can be. Like if that means
Yeah,
laying
I
back,
love
then
that.
it's like, do it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's all different kind of schools of thought, and I
Mhm.
can't, none of us can know all things. And there's something impressive and cool about just hardcoreness. Like I even am
Yeah.
fascinated by it. But personally, I believe that I've had moments where like, holy shit, I can actually see for the first time because I was safe enough that I could
Mhm.
meet some of these things, like meet some of these troubling thoughts, and I think that's reflected a little bit in the type of retreats you're talking about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would just say set an intention and stick to it.
Yeah.
So no matter what kind of sit you're going to be doing. So I mean, some of my teacher has done like sits where she sat 8 hours overnight and didn't move on purpose, just to because that's going to produce a certain kind of experience, which will have a certain kind of
Yes. Yeah,
insight
yeah,
to it.
yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Like that you learn a lot, I think, with something like that. Like that's ingredients for something powerful. You know what I
Something,
mean?
yeah,
Like, well, you can't
yeah,
itch. You can't itch all those itches that are
right,
you never knew you were swarming with before.
right. There's a beetle or a spider crawling on your arm, and
Oh, good.
you set a commitment and an intention to not move, so you're gonna watch what happens.
Yeah,
So
and one of the
yeah,
things I think would happen with that, which parallels what I see, I presume is going on with yoga, like physical yoga, is is a body thing. Like, there's a big thing of this spirituality stuff, which is like I say it like this, like return to the body and free your mind. Like
mm.
return awareness to the body, like your feet and your toes and your hands, because a lot of us live above the neck and our bodies are numbed out from all
Oh
kinds of
yeah,
things. Return awareness to the body and then let your mind go. You know what I mean? Stop
hmm,
being your ego. You know what I mean? And some of that is just stuff that takes time sometimes. I think sometimes hearing a bunch of people that are awakened to actually talk about it at length, you can all of a sudden you'll be like, wait a sec. What, are you telling me it's as simple as like just start seeing without being stuck to my thoughts? And then you do it and you're like, it can't be that simple. But then you,
oh
yeah.
yeah. I want to speak to that actually.
Yeah.
Um, so it is that simple, right? The ego can't we can't accept that it is that simple though. We have to have this convoluted thing.
An argument.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and so it's interesting. I was so my first retreat with my teacher Shyla was 2 years ago now. And she teaches concentration with the breath. And I had been doing it using metta, which is the way I was doing it was effectively like a mantra meditation. So when you're doing concentration practices, you're just pinning your attention to one thing and holding it there. And we were doing the breath. Um, and I struggled so hard on that first retreat. I told her one of the days I was like, "This has been my worst day on retreat ever," and she laughed, um, because I couldn't focus on my breath without controlling it. I would get close and like a concentration's building, but then my mind would like grasp onto it and the energy would die. And I had to spend uh most of that retreat, seven it was a 10-day retreat, maybe 7 days, teaching myself to just let my body relax when I'm breathing and I put my attention on the breath to not control it. And what's interesting is underneath that was like a desire to control the breath was a desire to control life, and
Mm-hmm.
it was the same thing. And when I let that go, like really dark memories came to the surface. But coming tying that into what you were saying about it being that simple, so I didn't do very well on that retreat, and then I went on another retreat at a different retreat center and practiced the same thing. And I'm trying to focus on the breath and I'm trying to be um but I'm having trouble either relaxing completely with no effort or grabbing and having too much effort, and I'm not able to find this middle ground. Like I can't balance it, and that's where it has to be. We have what's described as right effort in Buddhism, which is effortless effort. It's really like effort that's um independent of the ego, that's not ego based. And I was just one of the days I was like 3 or 4 days in, I was just sitting there and I was had my blanket on me and I was just like, oh, this is nice. And I just spontaneously went into this one of these absorptions called jhana. Like, and this was the second one. So there's four, and this was the second one, which is characterized by like not so much bliss and rapture, but just like a really chilled out like body feeling. And so I was like, whoa, what was that? How did that happen? Like I wasn't trying at all. And this thing just happened. But I still didn't have the skill to do it at will. So I was like, what's going on? And then so over the next couple of days, I was playing around with this and I discovered that if I just hold the breath like I'm holding a baby bird, like with love and joy and curiosity and not pushing it all, but just accepting the breath as it is with joy and with
Yeah.
love, immediately the concentration gets really strong. And within minutes, I'm in the absorption.
Some of
And
those
so
tactics have to be like some of them, a part of them might be giving you an extreme duty or whatever, giving you an extreme practice so that by contrast, the natural one is observed. Like, you know what I mean? Like maybe you couldn't otherwise hold your breath like that baby bird that you hold gently if it wasn't contrasted against what you observed in a dedicated breath
Oh,
holding or
right,
something like
exactly.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally, totally. Um, and the thing is, there isn't any reason. There's no reason to not do that with everything, right? There's no reason for me to hold this mouse with anything but joy and compassion. There's nothing serving anything other than that, right? In this conversation, holding you with joy and compassion, holding you with joy and compassion. And so, to tie the story up, I go back to the bench, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna hold it gently. And then I saw the mind like habitually pushing, and I'm like, no, let's bring it back. Let's just let this be what it is. And it was just that simple. It really was just that simple of holding the breath gently like a baby bird. And that's all you have to do. And I had this realization where there was like another 20, 30 minutes of tears, where the thing that was preventing me from doing that all along was me not accepting that I'm worthy of love just as I am. And I have to go out and get it. And this is like the physical experiential embodiment of that understanding, is if I just hold myself, hold my breath, hold myself with joy and love and compassion, then these states of mind that I'm trying to chase just I think the Dalai Lama said, like, happiness, you can't find it, but if you just relax, it's like a bird and it'll come and land on your shoulder. And
If
that's
you
sort
can
of what it's
relax,
like.
there's a real mind body thing going on there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I hate to sound like a broken record, but so many people I think are like maybe their image of relaxing is a Corona on a beach, and so they're
Mm-hmm,
like,
mm-hmm.
I've got it. I feel
It's
good, everyone. By the way,
it's an indulgence. Yeah.
right? But it's like almost robotic. It's like now truly go and lie down and see what is your mind gonna let you just do it? Is your
Yeah.
body gonna just let you do it? And
Right.
a weird thing I think can happen, and I'm curious to see your take on this, is my interpretation of pain lately. You know what I mean? Especially if the ego is wound way down and abs exited the room or something like that, and there's sort of like awareness, and you're sitting there with your body, and you'll be like, huh, like my legs hurt, but it's not like even a problem that they hurt. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like it's not like something I got to claw my way away from. And I think so many things people would be surprised to know are not either not a problem at all, or even something that you could look with mild fascination and it's not a problem when you orient correctly.
Yeah, totally, totally. There, I mean, you've probably seen those photos of that monk that burned himself alive, right, in
Yeah.
protest. So it was on the cover of the
That's
Rage Against the Machine
that's
album,
hardcore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
It's a
so some
famous photo. Everyone. Yeah.
right, and
Yeah.
he's sitting there peaceful and serene, like much more serene than you are when you're sitting in traffic or even sitting at home watching TV. Like he's
Right.
blissed out way beyond the guy with the corona on the beach, and he's burning to death,
Yeah.
right? And so there's an interesting book by Robert Wright called Why Buddhism is True, and he kind of talks about this a little bit. He had a friend that was a pretty hardcore meditator that, as an experiment, just went into a root canal and just asked them for no anesthetic, and just he
I've
wanted to
heard
observe.
this.
What's his name? We know who you're talking about.
Shinyan Morty?
No,
No?
he was a karate guy or
I
some sort of
it,
martial
it it
artist.
it might be the same person.
Yeah.
But this is just in the story.
Yeah.
Um, and basically, if your mindfulness is strong enough, which means that you're not letting sensations trigger thoughts and trigger suffering, the pain just becomes information.
Mm-hmm.
No different than pleasure, no different than anything
Mm-hmm.
else. And it goes
Mm-hmm.
from this horrible thing to just a neutral sensation. So yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Um, but after all, like all that stuff, like the Buddha talks about the two arrows, right? So the first arrow is the pain, and the second arrow is our reaction to the pain and our blaming ourselves and ruminating over the pain. And
Yeah.
that's the part that is optional. And then if you get rid of that, then the pain, you can just see it as just a transitory phenomenon like anything else. Tough to do. Like
Yeah.
that's a high bar to clear.
You can
But
see
yeah,
it in real life with sometimes you'll see a parent, right? And you'll see a dad and a kid walking through the mall, and the kid will fall over, and the kid will go, meh, and the dad will go, ah, you're fine, scoop him up and go, whoa, you had a little thing there, and the kid's giggling. And then somebody else will go, oh my God, are you okay? Oh, this is
right.
horrible. And then the kids, before
It
you know
must be
it, they're
bad. Yeah,
utterly distraught.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to judge any kind of parenting style. I'm
sure.
concerned somebody out there is gonna. I understand that it's hard. but
Not trying to minimize their experience. Yeah.
but so many things are like that. Like, would that little injury be as catastrophized, or would it literally be like something you could just read as information? You know what I mean? Oh,
Hmm.
you know what I mean? That information tells me something tells me something, obviously. And if I don't make a story out of it, I don't have to suffer on top of it.
Yeah, that
Um,
reminds me, a long time ago, 16, 17 years ago, right before I started practicing. This is probably one of the catalysts to me starting practicing. There's this TEDx talk by this guy named Sean Acor. Um, and it's like he called it like the happy secret to better work or something like that. Where he was talking about how, from kind of a secular perspective, um, so much of our perceptions and our suffering are just in the way that we're framing the experience. And
mm,
he gave an example of he was it's a funny example. He was supposed to babysit his little sister, and they're like hanging out in the bedroom, and his parents tasked him with taking care of her while they went for a nap. And they're playing with like My Little Ponies, like unicorns or something or whatever, and his like army men or whatever. And she falls from the top bunk onto the floor, like a good 5 or 6 feet, and he can see her face the tears start to well up, and he's like, "Oh shit!" Like she's gonna cry. My parents are gonna wake up. They're gonna get mad at me. This is gonna be a whole thing. And he said he just had the idea to say, "Oh my god, do you see how you landed on all fours? That's what unicorns do. You must be a unicorn." And immediately she's like, "Oh my god, I'm a unicorn."
yeah.
And that it was reframed instantly, where it's like she still had the pain and that experience, but it wasn't a big deal.
And that's why the teachers are non-reactive sometimes. I think
Exactly.
sometimes when people come, they're like, like if you grew up in the 90s and you saw the whole phenomenon of like soap opera watching moms in the afternoon, you know what I mean? Like you may have come home to like the dimmed lights with Chardonnay, like, where have you been? You know what I mean? Like overly overly dramatic type stuff. I bet you
Yeah.
sometimes the teacher's like, I'm not mirroring you. Like sometimes we
Right.
can't help it because we're sympathetic things, and if somebody's
Hmm.
crying, you feel empathy and stuff like that. But in a tutelage situation, I bet you sometimes those teachers have caused people to walk away and go like, what the hell? You know what I mean?
Totally.
Like, why didn't you like melt when I was melting there? And I think it's because they go, because you're believing the story.
Right.
That's
That's
why.
exactly why.
We don't
That's
need to
exactly why.
do that. We can skip the drama,
That's
you
exactly
know?
why. Yeah, that time that I had so I was on a retreat with her. This was a Vipassana retreat actually. So we weren't doing concentration. And I had this opening. I had this experience where I was meditating, and this void just appeared in front of me. This is spherical void, and it was there, and it was a blissful nothingness for like 20 minutes. And I've never had that experience. I wasn't trying to have it. It just happened. And we were doing Vipassana, and these things lead to nirvana. So it's like, maybe this was nirvana. So I'm scared to ask her. I wait like a day, and I catch her outside the oh no, I'm like sitting downstairs and just chilling out, and she happens to walk by. And I asked her, I described the experience, and I was like, "What was this, a nirvana experience?" And she she sits down next to me, she puts her hand on my shoulder, she says, "John, it's not helpful to ask questions like that." And then she just walks away, you know? And I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
she was very kind, like, well, there was nothing punitive about it at
Yeah.
all. But dude, I went upstairs to my room and I just yelled into a pillow, and I like was like, how could I be so dumb? And I was driving home, and I'm still a little bit bitter about it. Like, why did she do that? And I realized she didn't say anything mean. All she did was she held a mirror to me
Yeah.
and was like, however you react to this is what the teaching is going to be. And since I reacted in a bad way, in
Oh.
an egoic way, that was on me and not her.
Sometimes I think that like some of these teachers, sometimes I think they take like some pretty almost like cruel tactics. Like this guy here thinks he knows his shit. I'm gonna pick at him till he has an explosion to show you
Right.
you don't have it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Look at you like even think of the glorious lessons you took away going home and punch. I love that you told us that you
Yeah.
went away because so many people are like, what the fuck just happened? You know what I mean? Why didn't
Yeah.
she say welcome number two? You
Yeah. Why did
graduated.
she validate
Why
me?
didn't she
Yeah.
boast? Why didn't she inflate my ego? And you
Right.
got the wonderful gift of going, and I feel like we've met people that did that to me that were like, I'm not going to give you what your ego is looking for here, which is
Right?
inflation. You know what I mean?
Exactly, exactly.
And
And
it would only be suffering anyway. That inflated ego is going to pop, and it's going to be require all this energy to even hold together, even though it's a friggin' illusion.
right. And after I understood what it was, I was like, I respected her way, way, way more.
Yeah.
And also I realized like this is how you know that these teachings and this teacher are legit, because instead of indulging that and having me feel good in the moment, she's like, you're not, I'm gonna let you feel good until you complete this journey. And
Hmm.
I'm not gonna do anything that's gonna prevent you from doing that. And if I indulge you in this, then that's gonna be something you're gonna have to unlearn. And I don't want to waste your time with that, you know? So I
And by then you'll meet her as a peer, and there'll be nothing even needed to say, probably. Yeah.
right. Well, and thinking about this too is like, if that really was Nirvana, I really was enlightened, and if she said that to me, I wouldn't have been offended. I wouldn't have been hurt in the least.
Yeah.
Right. So the fact that I reacted that way is just evidence that like, okay, you got a lot more work to do,
Yeah, yeah.
you
I
know?
think this stuff is going to spread. I honestly
Mhm.
think there's going to be more of it. And one of the things that I think is going to grow is science on the like observatory
Mhm.
science from people becoming this way.
Mhm.
Because one thing that hasn't been, I don't think, addressed too much because it's been so isolated, like because it usually happens within private schools or like private monasteries, or it's been relegated to retreats, and the barrier between the capitalistic Western world and this spirituality as like sanity. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Spirituality
It
as
really is.
sanity at the end of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
day. I think it's gonna probably draw some attention. And one thing people might realize is what is going on neurochemically with this stuff, because it's reflected in physiology, some of these changes.
Absolutely.
And I think another thing that will be acknowledged is, well, what is the function of people going into this state, and why doesn't everybody just already do it? You know what I mean? I think those are
Mhm.
actually important questions that we probably can't get to here, but
Mhm. So I would recommend, the most recent retreat I went to with my teacher was in October in Georgia. So she teaches one over there every year and one in California every year. And there were researchers there from McGill University who we had the helmets, and they had with all the electrodes, and
yeah.
they were measuring us and stuff. And something you might be able to get him on the show. He probably would agree, I would imagine. His name is Jonas Mago. He's a neuroscientist studying exactly what you're talking about in McGill. And I know he's gone on some other podcasts talking about his research, and he's looking for all the funding he can get. So he might be interested in. I can send you his info when we're done here.
What does he look like? Nah, I can't
Yeah.
ask that. I feel like I maybe recognize that name.
That would be totally interesting. But John, I just want to say thank you so much for
So awesome, so fun.
spending some time with us today to tell us your story and talk about all the stuff that we've talked about. It's been amazing. One of the things we
Great.
like to do on the show is kind of at the end of it, we like to leave our guests with the last word. So for our
Mm.
audience, everyone who's watching this, if you have like one overarching message or one last thing you want to leave with everyone, I'll leave the floor with you to do that. And then maybe after you've done that, you can let our audience know where they can find you, what you got going on, and all that good stuff.
Sure. So, yeah, something that my teacher uh told us, so this last retreat, this meta retreat we did in October, something that I check every day now in this age of social media and rage bait and people at each other's throats. She said, check your mind for kindness every time before you speak, and you're going to save yourself a lot of trouble if you do that.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
so that's hard. It's a hard practice. That's what I'm
Mhm.
doing. You can find me on YouTube. Name of my channel is Big Dharma. I think my handle is at Big Dharma TV. Right now, my TikTok is the most popular. It's where I'm spending most of my time. Also, Big Dharma. I think my handle there is underscore Big Dharma. And I have a fledgling Instagram. Also, I think I have 73 followers right now. Also underscore Big Dharma on Instagram. So if you guys want to
Yep.
follow me and help boost my presence, that would be great. I'm going through a little bit of a lot of work at work right now, so I haven't been posting as often. But as soon as I'm through this patch, I'm going to be back to. I love doing this stuff. I love making content. It's super fun. It's addictive, and I have in my phone like literally hundreds of ideas of videos I want to make. So I'm on this train now, wherever it goes. Hopefully,
Yeah,
this works.
awesome.
Cool.
That's great. Awesome.
You got a
Thank
whole
you,
slew
John.
of
This
new
was
followers.
great. Thanks so much for being on the show. Thanks.
Thank you guys. This was great.